Good afternoon, everybody. Are you ready? I know it's the 5 o'clock plenary, but you're going to be in for a real treat now. And thank you so much, Shally, for the wonderful interview of the fantastic role model we've just had. We are going to have 3 amazing role models now to share how can we create more opportunities for women-led businesses in the world. So I am CEO and founder of Global Invest Her, and we demystify funding for women entrepreneurs to get them funded faster. And I'm also a passionate women's advocate. And I believe that you cannot be what you cannot see. So you're going to see and hear from 3 amazing ladies now who are going to tell and share some stories. And the way we're going to do this is this. We are going to start off by actually hearing from each of the 3 ladies what they do in their organizations to create more opportunities for women-led businesses. You're going to hear then, okay, what are the key learnings from that? And what are their practical key tips in order to be able to change the ecosystem? And then each of them has some homework for each of you. There's a call to action from each of you. So I'd like, without further ado, to welcome, first of all, our 3 panelists, and I'll tell you who they are. I'll sit here, you go there. So welcome, ladies. So first of all, to introduce to you, who have we got here? So first of all, I'd like to introduce Simona Scarpaleggia. Simona is the co-chair for the UN High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment. And she also has a second hat, because she's also the CEO of Ikea in Switzerland. She's got 2 hats, and she's going to share both hats with us today. Then we have Greta Schettler, who is from WEConnect International. And WEConnect is a corporate-led NGO. It brings together corporates to help get more women into the supply chain. So you need to know, if you've got a women-led business, you also need to know more about WEConnect and what Greta is doing. And last but not least, we have Fern. And so Fern Starke is from ExxonMobil, so she's a finance executive, a whiz, and she's going to share about the great things you don't know that they're doing. But ExxonMobil are very, very, very active in this space. So welcome, ladies. So we're going to have an active discussion. We're going to have an active debate. We had a fabulous time preparing this, so we hope you're going to enjoy it. And we will be leaving time at the end for a couple of questions, so, do have your questions ready. So I'd like to start with you, Simona. What would you say? Can you give us some examples from your work at the UN High-Level Panel on what you're doing, for to help more opportunities for women-led businesses?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here, and thankful for being invited. To introduce this, this is the report. I'm going to talk in a few minutes. But I was thinking, what are we really doing? And one image that comes to my mind is something that the 25 young ladies that are here, 25 years old ladies that are here, maybe didn't see directly, but I'm sure that if you Google it, you can remember. When I was a child, 1968, so you can go back, there was this fantastic image of our planet, the Earth, taken from the Apollo mission, from that they were going to the moon. And the Earth was amazing. I still remember I was fascinated, and I kept this picture for years. What was the beauty of the Earth there is that it was borderless, completely borderless. It was a magic vision of something that harmoniously was living, actually. And time passed by, and we built and continued building borders. Borders between men and women, borders between countries, between rich and poor, and so on and so forth. So this report is about eliminating these borders, because in fact the world, a sustainable world, is borderless. And no matter how much resistant we are, I believe this is a sort of a backlash or a swan song of the patriarchal system. Sharing, I love this title, we talk about sharing economy. Sharing is a very feminine dimension. Sharing information, food, shelter, clothing has been the mean through which women defended their children. They defended life, in fact, and it's from time immemorial. So I think that this report is mainly about taking away borders and hindrances. When it was founded by the Secretary General of the United Nations, the purpose was to get to Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which means that by 2030, so it's quite close, we should reach in the world gender equality. And we are not there. We are far from we are advancing, but the pace is too slow. So what we need to do is to put into action all the propositions that have been taken and shared and advance. So the report has the first report, there will be a second one, but the first report is very specific because it addresses the world of work. It's very concrete because it indicates which are the drivers that will lead to reach gender equality. And just to name some of them, the digital inclusion, the financial inclusion, working on social norms and legal barriers and others. You can find it on the website. And thirdly, it's open. So there are concrete examples that can be escalated, can be copied, and more examples and best practices are welcome.
So I bet you didn't know about this report, so there's a wealth of information there, so dive into it. Now, Greta. Thank you, Simona. Greta, tell us more about WEConnect and what are you doing to make the world better for women-led businesses?
Thank you, Anne. And I just want to say that I'm very honored to be here and to be able to work with two ladies that I actually get to work with a lot with, Simona on the UN high-level panel, as well as Fern and the whole ExxonMobil team. So what WEConnect International does is that we are an alliance of companies that are committed to buying from women-owned businesses. And I'd like to frame that in 4 different areas. So the first is supplier diversity. The second is the power of an alliance. The third is certification. And then the fourth is impact. All right, so coming back to the first one, which is supplier diversity. A lot of people don't necessarily know what that means, but the reason why WEConnect International was formed is really around the whole concept of helping to bring more diverse companies into the supply chains of these multinational corporations. And why do they do that? They do that because the number one reason when we survey our members is really about innovation. They want to make sure that they are hearing the best ideas and that they're understanding what's happening in that space. So a lot of times that innovation comes from looking at your people, looking at your process, and looking at your philosophies. And you'll hear that through different common threads that we have with a lot of the companies of how are they thinking about being innovative. All right, so then we come to diversity, and a lot of that is making sure, and we've heard this through a lot of the different discussions, of what is diversity and how do we make sure that women are a part of that. Now, often I'll have a lot of conversations with women-owned businesses and they say, well, we don't want to win a contract because I'm a woman. I want to win a contract because I'm the best business. And we all agree with that, and I'll let you know that all of our companies will not just give a contract to any woman-owned business because they're a woman. They give it to the woman because she has the best quality product, something that's innovative, have the best price, and they see that relationship going with them forward. But the benefit is that they're also a woman because they do value diversity within their companies. And what I'll also say is that our companies represent $1 trillion of consumer spend every year, global spend. Less than 1% of that goes to women. So the factor that women aren't getting these opportunities, even though we have qualified businesses globally, we know that's happening. It's the same way with the board conversation. There are qualified women, but women aren't getting those opportunities. So how do we change the game? How do we level the playing field? And that's what WEConnect is about. So that's really the first part of this, is supplier diversity. The second part, what I mentioned, was the alliance. All right. So it's very hard to do this alone, and I think that's what's important, is how do we really work together? So companies came together to show that in order for them to be able to buy and be able to go into different countries and find the women-owned businesses, they need to work collectively. So that's where it's really important that the companies really work together to do this. They share best practices, they learn, because it's also very difficult to figure out how do you change these processes through a company. The third part then is certification. So it's really important, again, women will often ask, why do we get certified? And certification, why do I need to be certified, and why doesn't a male-owned business need to be certified? Well, certification really is at all different levels, whether it's disabled, whether it's national or gay and lesbian, LGBT, minority businesses, and what it helps is to allow you to be counted. What we see around the world and with the data is that there's a lack of data because people don't ask the questions. Our financial indicators, we don't know how many women are being banked. We don't know how many women are getting these opportunities because we're not asking the question. And what we all have an important role to do is to start looking at how we're being counted so that we can shift that balance. And so it's important, again, from a certification point, when we look at ISO or we look at scuba diving, you want to make sure that any type of certification that you have out there, that it's globally recognized, and that when you buy a product from a woman-owned business in the UK, or whether you're buying from India or from Africa, that you're getting that same type of value. And then the last is impact. So impact really is going back to what Simona said. It's the SDGs, is how do we create gender equality? How do we drive economic growth? How do we make sure that we have responsible consumption? And all of our companies and the impact that we're making together are really about having that. So that's why we're really excited to be here.
And I like the segue here because we've like the high level at the UN level, and we have at the WEConnect connecting, making the bridges and the alliances as well to make those goals come true with corporates. And now we're going to talk with Fern. So Fern, tell us more about ExxonMobil. Give us some examples of what you are doing that's really fantastic.
Starting with the sharing economy, I think Anne's actually got an extra mic.
I'm robbing
there.
2 mics. Don't have enough of the mic. Go ahead, Fern.
So what I want to talk about is the 3 outward-facing programs that ExxonMobil has for women's economic empowerment. And the 3 of them is, one is the investment in our communities in which we do business, in which we work. It's the work that our ExxonMobil Foundation does with the UN Foundation on a study around what are the best ways to invest in women. And then the third is the supplier diversity program, where we do a lot of work with WEConnect. So I just pause and talk about the first 2 now. Exxon and Mobil merged together in 2000, and both of the companies had a very rich history of investing in the communities in which we work. And when the 2 came together, just like we study everything else inside our company, we wanted to determine the best way to invest our money. And the ExxonMobil Foundation decided that they wanted to invest in women's economic empowerment. And the focus on that, when they looked across the globe, there's many issues that many communities can have that require support. But one of them that crosses all boundaries, all nations, and all borders, is women. And when women thrive, when women have economic empowerment, when women are earning, they invest back in their communities, they invest in their families, and it strengthens everything within that community and the country. And in fact, when women earn money and have control over their money, they invest 90% of it back into the families and communities, and men only invest 35%.
Does that surprise anybody here?
So we were having great success working with local organizations and global organizations investing in women in many different countries. And we were investing in microfinancing, networking, and women's education, as well as providing technological tools to help in the farming or agrarian businesses. And in 2012, we decided to step back and say, are we really investing in the elements that are going to move women's economic power to the furthest degree that they can? So ExxonMobil Foundation and the UN Foundation worked together, and what they did is they looked at 133 empirical studies that were already out there, so the sharing economy again, and they took that information and they categorized it. They categorized it between what was proven and working, what was promising, what needed course correction, and where we needed more study. And out of that, we made some decisions in 2014 how to move forward in 3 strategic areas. But I'll come back to that later.
So do tell us, Fern, because ExxonMobil have invested a lot of money actually in women-led businesses. Can you kind of share that big figure? Because it was quite impressive.
So since 2005, we've invested over $100 million in community-based program for women.
So that's walking the talk, ladies, huh? That's fantastic. And I want to come back to you, Simona, now with the Ikea hat, CEO of Ikea hat. So can you tell us about some of the initiatives, what's working and what you've put in place to change things for women at Ikea?
Well, there's plenty of examples, but building on what Fern was saying, I can share this example of cooperation that we have in our supply chain. And we have, among our suppliers, some social enterprises. And the story I want to share is the story of a social enterprise based in India called Rangsutra. And this company started a cooperation with Ikea, I would say now 4 years ago. And the purpose was for us to show that it is possible to create something that means business, and it is not about supporting through charity, which is also, of course, valuable, but is not sustainable over time. So we wanted to make it an integral part of our supply chain. So we partnered with the UNHCR and with this social enterprise company that employs only women in this case. We contributed with 2 things. The first thing was the design of the product, because we wanted to make them commercial for our markets. And the second is that we provided the sales channel, which is our stores. Then, with the partnership and cooperation with UNHCR and the leadership of these social enterprises, we trained the women of a very poor region in India, which is Uttar Pradesh. And there is a very interesting dynamic here, because we, through the UNHCR, we managed to get consensus around the fact that we were hiring women. In that region, women don't work, and they are not allowed somehow by the social norms to work. So through them and through the cultural mediation, we convinced the husbands first that was good for their family. They were allowing graciously the women to work. It might sound strange for someone who lives in other latitudes, but it is what is valuable for them. And then we convinced the mothers-in-law, and then it was a piece of cake.
Always get the mothers-in-law on your side. We know that too, don't
it was a piece of cake convincing the women. We started with 52, and now we are over 1,000 women working for this. All of them, as you said, more than 90% of the income went to the family and the community. All of them invested the money in their children's education, and they're continuing doing so. They are producing products that at the beginning we only sold in 2 countries because it was too small, the amount of goods that they were able to produce. Now we sell it worldwide in limited editions, also because we need to meet their capacity.
I think that's really good, because listen to that, because it shows it's possible. And I think what's very important...
And it's a win-win. Nobody loses money. Yeah?
So you can actually distribute your products via Ikea. You can actually do good, and actually, if you are working in oil and gas, if you're working in oil, you can actually work with ExxonMobil. You can reach... How many members do we have in the Alliance at WEConnect?
75 companies.
75 companies. So instead of saying, where do I have to go to find corporates that I can sell my goods to if I'm a fabulous woman entrepreneur? So where do they go? Tell us.
Yeah, so we have our website. You can find that very easily. But then what we do is that we actually have operations in 24 different countries. So we do see the power of making sure that those connections happen. What we often see for women-owned businesses is that there is that lack of ability to access the information and to make those right connections. So we do provide those opportunities, what we'll call them Meet the Members, where companies can come out and they'll talk about what are they looking for, how do you bid, where are the tenders available, what types of products and services they're looking for, and the types of standards. So there's a great opportunity as well for women-owned businesses to learn about that.
So tell us more of what you've learned from the different initiatives that you've done with through your corporate partners. I believe you had a couple of examples you wanted to share with us, Greta. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah,
so
sure.
The key learnings, lady, and take note.
And I'm very excited because I just get to be the channel of the champions that I get to work with. So I really kind of wanted to frame it in two contexts, so power of one and the power of many. So the first of the power of one, and I would love for Fern to also talk about her story here a little bit too, but is to talk a little bit about what Walmart did. So Walmart, there was one individual that I worked with a long time ago, and she was in government relations, and she saw how much of an impact their supplier diversity was having in the U.S. And she really saw this need to make more connections for women-owned businesses around the world, and so she started championing this idea. One person in government relations, not even in procurement, that we should do something globally. She had a huge uphill battle to go. But in 5 years' time period, she has now been a complete champion. The CEO, all the way down, they completely shifted their whole entire structure, and they have placed women at the center of the business that they do. Wow. They have seen the 80% of their, which I think was mentioned here before as well from Nissan, of consumers are women that are making those purchases, and that they do care where their products, goods, and services come from, and it makes a difference. And so they, from one small idea, from one section of one giant company, they have been able to shift a huge entity that is... makes huge amounts of global purchasing and
so chip
every
in
year.
here, Fern. Tell us a bit more about ExxonMobil and the great work that you're doing over there.
Let me just do a connection with WEConnect. We're actually on 10 boards around the world, as well as the international board, and so that gives us great access to the information and all those great companies out there that want to do business with us. So thank you for everything you do and in helping us support us in that. ExxonMobil, I was actually surprised to learn that we've had a supplier diversity program for over 30 years. And in the U.S. alone, in 1 year, last year, we spent over $1 billion with women and minority-owned businesses.
I think that deserves a round of applause, doesn't it? I mean, $1 billion, that's a lot of money. That's fantastic.
So we're taking that and we're learning from that to go out to other countries. And last year we were over $250 million in other countries around the world. And what we do is we partner with WEConnect in those countries, and we partner with the governments, and we partner with the local NGOs to find out who has businesses that can support ExxonMobil. Now you can imagine when we go into some countries that have never had oil and gas exploration, those people in there are not going to have the kind of supplies, they're not going to have the oil and gas infrastructure. But they're going to have a lot of other things that ExxonMobil is going to need when we mobilize in those countries. And so there are lots of opportunities for people on the ground in the countries where we do business.
Yeah, and Fern, if I can pick up on that, I think this is one of the things that's really exciting, is that people often say, well, what can I sell to ExxonMobil? But every single one of our members is more like a household. They buy everything: furniture, coffee, events, consulting, legal services. Why does that not go to women? And so that's where it's thinking, again, outside the box, and that everybody can think differently, that any one division, even within a company, can really start to be a little bit more proactive and creative in thinking, what can I do to make sure that the purchases I'm making are coming from women, or that they're at least a part of that. So I think that's what's really exciting.
I'd like to pick up on the point that you were making in supply chain as well. That you were saying when we were working together on this about, actually women-led businesses can partner with other women-led businesses to piggyback to get into the supplier. So can you kind of share your experiences around that? Because I think that's a really important point, a good strategy to have.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of goes back to the second part that I was mentioning before, is the power of many. So it is very difficult work, and there is a big jump in terms of a woman-owned business that maybe at one level being able to sell to a large corporation. But that doesn't preclude potentially where you have a women-owned business in the US who's potentially quite at the right scale, who needs to buy from a woman-owned business or a manufacturer in India or in China or in Mexico. And why not help connect that to be able to make a more sustainable, a more impactful supply chain? And I think that's what's really exciting is that all the companies that work with us, they see that opportunity. And what we're trying to do now is look at how do we start connecting our women-owned businesses with each other and thinking about that. Again, this comes back to that certification. If you want to do business in China, it's very difficult to do that if you don't have those relationships. But if you already have a network and you know that that individual has gone through that same certification process as you have, it's going to make that much easier, and there's going to provide a little bit more trust, which I think we were
Fern,
talking about.
what would you like to add to that, if there are any?
I was just thinking, since I've been here, I've met so many amazing women, and I've been collecting people's business cards, and I have given people's cards who are from India to people from Canada, Canadian cards to people in France. And that's just from walking around and getting to meet all you wonderful women. And just think of the power of what we've got in this room and what we can achieve together. It's just amazing.
It's phenomenal. And I think one of the key things that I see, I want to bring the women entrepreneurs who are looking for funding into this mix as well. I think one important message is to say, yes, you need to look for investors, and having corporates as clients is a fantastic source of money. It's a fantastic source of funding. So it's important to think of it, not to just kind of think of the banks and my angel investors, my VCs. Actually having partnerships with great corporates is one of those things you should be doing. And there's the statistics, it's very hard. When we were talking about only 1%, of women getting into the supply chain, when it comes to raising funding, only 7% of venture capital goes to women, and only 15% of seed capital, the earlier stage, goes to women. Hello? The funding gap between men and women is $300 billion. That's ridiculous. And out of that 7% of venture capital coming back to minorities, only 1% goes to women of colour. So there's a lot to be done. And that's why it's so important to see, at big level, corporates, organizations coming together to partner together. So now let's kind of dive a little bit further in. We've looked at some key examples that you've shared. We've looked at some of the key learnings. Now, tell us your practical key tips. We want some tools, the ladies in this room who are listening, to pick up on your example, Greta, of what you were saying, like one person can change the way things happen in a corporate. So let's everybody chip in. What would be your kind of key tips, practical, that you want to share that members of our audience and outside watching us can take away?
So I was going to share a few of the learnings that we had from the UN roadmap, Women's Economic Roadmap. And just quickly, there was 3 areas that we decided to invest in. The first one is around giving women cell phones to be able to do banking. And I think this one is really important. Women to be able to do banking in a private manner is really critical, because if they have the privacy, they have safety. The banking through the phone is inexpensive. And so there's no cost to them. They don't have to walk miles to a bank. And again, it's private. And in many of the developing countries, there's actually a term for what's called family give-outs. It's called kin cash. So that when a woman has money, the expectation is that she gives it to the family members. And if they've got private banking that they can do, they can invest that back in their company. Yeah.
Company. Yeah.
I was just going to say, quickly, there's 2 others. We've learned that blended learning is the best. So we do that in the Western world, right? We go send our kids or go off to university or colleges, and then we're also doing e-learning at the same time. And so one of the things that we're doing in Nigeria is we're doing 6-week training programs with women on finance and business. And then we're following that up with mentoring and e-learning. And the e-learning is really important because it's hard for women to take the time to go someplace to be educated. And this way they have it at their fingertips.
So Simona, can you share with us a couple of key pointers from your experience at Ikea, because you've done a lot of changes
we have done
there.
a lot of work, and the results are also there. So I share them because this is encouraging all the others. There's no threat or extra cost or whatever, because we in Switzerland have reached gender equality, and it has been certified already 2 years ago. Ikea committed as a group to reach gender equality, so the SDG 5, in 2020, so 1 decade before the normal deadline. And how did we do that? If I can summarize, we worked on 3 main pillars. The first one is awareness. We really shared and took the time for people to understand what's in it for them, what are the advantages that both men and women have when it comes to realizing, in fact, gender equality. And it's a very, very important part for me, because it makes it not an episode, but something sustainable.
So you were sharing, just tell us a bit more about that, because you were explaining how your top executives took time out and that you did it in a few steps. I think it's important to share, because that's kind of a really good key tip.
Yeah. That's I was lucky to be part of this process. It was like 10 years ago. The group management, so the 10 top executives on a group level, were shocked by our internal statistics. We were convinced that we were a very democratic company with a strong set of values, Scandinavian, so gender equality is not a topic. And then you look at 200 top positions, and it's 4% women. And the rest is mainly men and Scandinavian, if not Swedish, in their mid-40s.
Very homogeneous.
Very, very homogeneous. So they say but the good thing is that because of the values underneath, they said, okay, no, this is really a shock, we need to do something. And the choice was to go through an awareness process. So these top 200 executives were all gathered in a workshop for 3 days, and then 5 more days after a couple of months. I was invited at the time because I was one of the leading HR managers, so I was part of it. And there was some emotional moments, a lot of discussions, but it was positive that the thing came out. And then after a couple of months of reflections with the respective management teams, we came with a collective commitment. Now we need to do something. It is not a threat, but it is an opportunity. So how can we do that? And now the results are there, as I said, and we are performing also as a company.
So tell us more about your flexible working.
Yeah, awareness is number 1. New ways of working. So flexibility is number 2, and flexibility, it means working from remote, having a flexible time schedule, going from part-time to full-time and vice versa without major problems. And this is possible if you nurture in the organization a culture of being result-oriented and not task-oriented, because this is the real
And that is
change.
a major shift. I think that's a huge societal shift.
Yes.
And it's also the millennials are not going to take it any other way but that way.
Yeah.
So corporates have to listen to that. And, it's not just for women, it's just for the new generation. We have to listen to that.
Yeah.
It's a new way of working and create a new place where
and this
you
is
can
good,
bring your full
good
self
for
to
both
work.
men and women.
Exactly.
And the third and last thing is the power of partnership and networking. This dimension of solidarity, exchanging information, sharing knowledge and competences and ideas, it's very innovative, it leads to co-creation. It's super important, and then to talk about the power of one and the power of the many. One woman can do anything, but many women can do everything.
I like it. Yes. One woman can do anything, but many women can do everything. And you know what? We women, we actually have so much more power than we know. We really do. We just have to realize it, to seize it. And the thing is that we use power. It can be seen as a dirty word, and it shouldn't be. Because power actually means having resources, having opportunities to do more good. And I think we frame it differently. as women. It's not power for ourselves and for our own self-aggrandizement. It is for our community, it is for our company, it's further. So picking up, thank you, Simona, picking up on the power of many, tell us a bit more about the network effect and your key tips from WEConnect International.
Yeah, I think what's so great is that we're able to then survey so many of our companies, and we talk to them about what are they really looking for, what's making them successful. And I think it's really kind of keeping that innovation at the top. And what a lot of different companies will say that what makes them and what allows them to be innovative is that really, both as leaders as well as organizations, is that they are constantly challenging the status quo. They are looking and asking questions of why we're doing certain things. They're experimental. They look at how they can also what's the next trend that's coming up. And there's a lot of, again, looking at then how do they pull in the leadership and get that buy-in. So one of the threads I've seen from both of all of our members, as well as through a lot of the different companies that's speaking here, is that importance of still making the internal business case. That in order for any of our companies, they usually have to test small. We talked about this earlier. Don't go too big to begin with, but start small. Make sure that you put the right time and resources into ensuring that it's successful and that it meets your company culture. Because every different sense, whether you're a bank or whether ExxonMobil or Ikea, there's going to be something different that aligns with your core business strategy. This is not CSR. So it has to make business sense. But take the time to do the report, start small, and when that's successful, it's very easy then to sell across the organization because they get it and they understand how it aligns with their values. So that's what I would say from a company perspective. From a women-owned business perspective, get certified. Network as much as possible. Think about these opportunities. Keep thinking bigger. And from a government perspective, I think what's amazing we saw is that we all came together, our corporate members as well as the women-owned businesses. And in India just recently, we hosted our largest forum ever, which was big for us. It was 3,000 women-owned businesses all across India. On a large number of companies that all came together about looking at how they create deals and opportunities between each other. That's when we're talking about really making a shift and putting more money in the hands of women. And I think that that's what's exciting, is that each and every one of us has an opportunity to do that, whether at the small scale or a big scale, and it's just about starting somewhere.
And Fern, tell us a little bit more about your key tips to the women entrepreneurs about how do you become a supplier to big corporate like ExxonMobil?
Yeah, to the women entrepreneurs, I think it's really important to understand your customer. So spend the time to do research on your customer and know what is their value, just as you're saying. So for the oil and gas industry, safety is number one. So when you're doing your pitch, you better have safety in there. And then you really need to differentiate yourself. Why should you be the company that we do business? And it's no different than what I would tell a young person applying to the corporation. Why do we want to hire you? And differentiate yourself, differentiate your product. And then once you've got a deal, then absolutely meet that. Don't oversell what you can do. Meet your commitments and do it with excellence. Because the most important deal you're going to get with a corporation is the very first deal. It doesn't matter how small or how big it is, you've got to deliver on it, because that's the only window, the only portal we have into seeing you.
Yeah, because it's very important. The corporate executives who agree to partner with you, they're putting their internal reputation on the line. So it's not just for their own but it's like in everything, we women, we have to do everything, try it 3 times as well as for guys, and it's good just in general for any supplier who has to work with a corporate.
Absolutely.
You have to be excellent and give what you know.
And if I could add something to that, because it seems like kind of a no-brainer, but when we do our research with all of our women-owned businesses, often what they'll say is, let's say it's ExxonMobil, can you do this? And the woman-owned business will say, or the entrepreneur, they don't want to turn it down. They don't want to say, no, I can't, because this is my opportunity. But what companies have often told us is that we would prefer that you say, I can't do that, but I can do this, and I can deliver that with quality, versus, yes, I can do that, falling short, because as you said, there's not a second chance. Yeah. And they appreciate that transparency, because that's what they often don't get, and we see this time and time again, is that people want to get that first deal, and so they overpromise, and it doesn't enable them to really grow. So that, I think, is really important, is being transparent and telling them what you really can do.
And if I can build just back on that, to the point of WEConnect, or the fact that our company wants to do business with women-owned companies, and you'd made the comment that some women say, well, I don't want to get the job because I'm a woman, right? You're not going to get the job because you're going to get a woman, because you're a woman. You're going to get the job because you've got the best product or quality. And you know what you're going to do is you're going to get an introduction. You're going to get an introduction and use that. And don't worry that maybe you got a little leg up there, because I will tell you, in life there will be many times where it's the opposite. So that one time that it's a positive for you, take it and celebrate it and run with it.
And tell us a bit more, just to wrap up here. You were mentioning something around having advocates as well internally. That's also a key tip to move this forward.
I think it's really important to have advocates. And men are really critical. And I don't see a lot of men left in the audience this afternoon. I saw many earlier. We need male advocates. Men are 50% of the universe, and without male advocates, we are not going to reach gender parity. And so that's really important. But we women are absolutely critical for each other and supporting each other. Do you know that when a man gets promoted, people celebrate, right? They congratulate him. And what happens when a woman gets promoted? People step away from her, and they say, why her? We need to support each other every day. I'm a mentor to many, many young women, and too often when a young woman is being successful, the other young women turn away from her. We cannot afford that. Please celebrate each other's successes, because the more successful we are, the more successful all of us are going to be.
I like that wrap up. So, real quick, your one call to action, please, to the audience.
Contribute to this. www.womenseconomicempowerment.org. You can submit your best practices and business models, and we will make sure, or try, provided it's validated, that they are amplified in the information here. Thank you.
Greta?
Sure. What I would love is for everybody to join and get involved. So we are 75. Let's make it 3,000 companies. We're 6,000 women-owned businesses. Let's make it 1 million. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to really make a movement, and we're really excited to be able to work with anybody here to make that a global movement, as well as we did like with organics or with fair trade or with anything else. It's really possible to put more opportunities for women. So thank you.
Fern?
And I'm going to ask you to contribute as well. I'd like you to contribute to the Women's Economic Roadmap, and that's www.womeneconroadmap.org. You will find fantastic information there, and we need your information around what works in supporting women, and then that will be used globally and shared around the world.
So, now, I'm going to stand up for this part. Now it's over to you. So thank you so much, ladies. Let's start by giving them a big round of applause. And you know what? It's been such a pleasure for me. They are so accessible. They're so humble. They are wonderful. So you know what? Never be afraid to go up to the speakers afterwards. Don't jump on all of them because the poor ladies. But I'm saying they are always there to talk to you. So please do. Please go, and to myself as well. So, what questions have you got from the audience? Let's get a few questions. Let's see. Yes?
Me or somebody else?
You can go first.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Annina Gardner. I'm an advisor on corporate sustainability, and I teach business and human rights at Johns Hopkins SAIS. I have a question for Fern, actually a plea for Fern, because ExxonMobil is doing some incredible work and putting some serious money behind what you're doing in women's economic empowerment. But I need you, we all need you to be an intrapreneur within your own company, okay? Because you're working with women in communities all over the world, while you still have some serious climate deniers in the top of your company, and funding a lot of elections in the United States for people who are climate deniers. And so I need you and your other wonderful colleagues to really work on the C-suite to make sure that you work on the climate justice part, because 75% of women are farmers, smallholder farmers, and it's almost sort of counterproductive to all the amazing work you are doing. So please help us with ExxonMobil in the US political system.
I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, but there's a lot of stuff in the press about ExxonMobil, but let me tell you that at the C-suite, we take climate change very seriously. We do recognize it, and there's a lot of different things that ExxonMobil does. So you hear what we don't do, you don't hear what we do. We have significantly reduced emissions in our own operations. We do significant amount with the automobile industry and others to help consumers reduce their emissions. We have huge research where we're trying to find that step change that will really take us somewhere in the whole carbon-free world. And we also work on policy. So we're firing on 4 cylinders in those areas. We do take it seriously, and we are concerned about the environment.
And thank you for that question. It's a great question. It's time, it's of the time, and it's great to grab that opportunity when you have a fabulous senior executive here. And thank you for answering it so frankly. Thank you, Fern. Okay, so we've had a question from here. Let's try here. Hot seat over here. What's a burning question from here? Oh, we have one here. So we'll come back to you guys. Keep thinking. Yep.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much also for your honesty and sharing great lessons. Question to all the panel, at least. I think you all mentioned the importance of working with men, and I was wondering what are you each doing to engage men and ensure that at the end of the day this is really a couple, a family, and a societal issue, and not just a women's issue. So thanks very much.
Great question. Who'd like to take it first?
I can start?
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's a great question, and I've worked in the space for a long time, and often I'm speaking to a lot of women about how do we change things for women. So what's exciting about the supplier diversity space is that it's very diverse. So there are a lot of men in this space, and I think, again, if you keep coming back to the business case and what we do at WEConnect, we are talking to everyone at all different levels, the CEO level, the supplier diversity inclusion, sustainability, CSR. It is a whole company strategy, and so it's important from the companies that we work with that everybody is bought in and gets it. From the women-owned businesses perspective, absolutely the same thing. We are constantly looking at how do we bring women-owned businesses into the, and we support them, but also looking at how do we also bring their partners, or we are talking about how can we work together to look at changing a lot of that, the ecosystem that's available for women-owned businesses. So we do recognize that, but I think that it's important continuously having that at the forefront of our mind, that as we are building stakeholder engagements, that men are at the table as well.
Simona, will you pick it up with the 2 hats? So at UN high-level panel level, because I think that's, it's a panel for women's economic empowerment. How do you get the men involved there? The he for she's?
Yeah.
And then also at Ikea. 2 hats.
Yes, so gender equality implicitly or intrinsically implies men. So you cannot have gender equality without both genders represented. And it is not about antagonizing men. Creating a better society for men and women is the ultimate purpose. So we need to partner. I really believe that we need to support each other and create synergic solutions. We always, also in the work of the panel, first of all, there are some male partner members as well. But we also always mention that we need to partner with men in order to make women thrive and be supported, and men. It's a lot about awareness again. So share the same platform somehow. So we do the same also at Ikea. We believe that we need to have sponsors or advocates or supports, both men and women, both for men and women. So I think it's the only way. Every conflict, if we create a conflictual environment, that's by definition inefficient. Conflicts has never ever created wealth in a broad scale. Maybe someone became rich out of conflict, but it's a minority. In general, it's the opposite. Prosperity comes out of peace and balance.
I'll address it beyond the policy space. So we have one of our senior executives, male, just actually sitting behind you, who's joined us here this week, and he's learning and
Stand up and be and say hi. We have a male champion. Thank you for being here, because the simple fact that you're here is really important. That is showing walking the talk, so thank you. Fern.
We also have what we call women leaders on the road. So when we travel around the world, we reach out and we'll hold events with the women and managers in the areas where we are. We now have male advocates participating in Women Leader on the Road. And so when they're traveling out, they're meeting with the women interest networks and they're talking to them. And so they're showing support that way. We're also engaged with men on how to support women's growth within the company. And so there's many different ways. But I will say it was about 2 years ago that the women's groups understood strategically how important it was to reach out to the men. It seems so obvious now, but it took us till a couple years ago to get there.
I wanted to add one more thing that I think is really important about this topic, is that both in this work that I do now and my previous role, is that it was always important to start with the subject matter.
Tell us what your previous role was, because it's important to the context.
I worked at the U.S. Department of State and the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues and led the U.S. foreign policy as it relates to women's economic participation for 6 years. And when we started off with that, nobody wanted to listen to us across the board and any different subject matter that we talked about. It was always like, oh, well, we'll bring some women along. It was add women and stir. And where we got to after 2-3 years of talking, of understanding why were we not being heard. And it was often that we were starting the conversation with, it's important for women to be there. And where a lot of the people, when they were discussing the topic, were talking about economic growth or national security or border control or very specific topics. So if you talked about it and you started with understanding what their area of expertise was and saying, all right, we're talking about security, and it's important of what's happening in that space and what's happening with the population, or we're talking about economic growth. And we started to see that, all right, countries are interested in spurring economic growth. What's happening with the population? What's happening with their labor force participation? Where are women? People started to understand how it fit into their area where they had an ability to make an impact. And I think often what we find, especially with men, is they want to make a change. They don't know where they fit in or how it relates to their role. So the more that you can put it in the context of someone's expertise and why it makes a difference, it goes back to the business case, they become ecstatic and champions. And that was what was so excited for me. I walked into a meeting one time and nobody knew who I was. And there was the general there it was a whole interagency meeting. And I was sitting in a back bench because I came late. And he said, but wait, what are we doing to make sure that our work is empowering women? And I just sat back and smiled because I didn't have to say a thing. And that's when we knew we were making progress. And if you can make that in an interagency, a bureaucracy, and why I think I'm still optimistic that things will continue to move forward in the US, there are too many people that are champions, and that the cat is out of the bag. We understand what we need to do, and there's no way going back. And so I think it's important now that we all work together in partnerships to continue that momentum and moving forward. People get it.
Great. Couple questions. Yep. And then I'll come back to you. So, yes. Can we have a mic over here? Thank you. And we're running short, so we're going to get those questions in quick. There's another lady behind you.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you. This is a really encouraging and engaging discussion. I appreciate your honesty. My name is Evgenia. I run a nonprofit organization called Teach for Bulgaria, which is a partner in a global network called Teach for All. We work in education. We work in primary and secondary education. And I've heard a lot of us talk about women today, but not as much talk about girls. And I wonder, given all the research that you've gone through, all the best practices, how early should we start to empower women for the future? As we know, there are so many follow-up effects amalgamating over time if we don't start early enough to form the mindsets, the self-confidence, and the capabilities that are going to make them want to take the opportunities you all are providing so generously. Thank
That's
you.
a great question. I want to pick up on that first because there's a recent video, I don't know if you've seen it, if you haven't, look it up on YouTube, that shows school children with their teacher, and the teacher said, can you draw me a fireman? And then, can you draw me a surgeon? And can you draw me a fighter pilot? And so the children were drawing the pictures, and then the teacher said, oh, what's your fireman's name? Oh, it's Bob, Jim, whatever. And so basically, the children drew all the pictures, and then the teacher said, okay, well, let's see who these are. So in walked a fireman, a surgeon, and the fighter pilot, and they were all women. So the fighter pilot came in with her big helmet on her head, and the surgeon came with her stethoscope. The children's faces, these were 5 and 6-year-olds. Okay, so this is to answer how early. 5 and 6-year-olds, their jaws dropped, and they couldn't believe it. Literally, you could see it in their faces, so do watch this. And what was so interesting is what they were saying, that they had basically about 65 children, as only 5 of them drew women in those roles. So it starts so early. Now, we've 1 minute left, so we're going to be super quick. And we've 2 questions, real quick.
I would just say it starts even before, at the time of conception. You've got to start with gender on both sides.
Yeah.
From when a woman is being able to eat, her nutrition levels is going to impact that child and her education, her levels. I mean, anything shows it's the whole life cycle from the time they're born, before they're born, till the end. So it never can start too early, in my case.
You know, just one thing, the claim, the motto of our diversity direction is be yourself. What we need to nurture is the be yourself. Also men, step in their shoes.
Yeah.
They are grown up, they need to be strong, never doubt. You need to take a decision and stick to it because and they have doubts as anybody else.
Yeah.
So if we just crack this code and allow each human being to be himself or herself, that's a big step.
So we're running out of time. So those ladies who had questions, please come to the ladies up afterwards. And my last words would be to say, when I talk to women entrepreneurs and to investors, I say to the women entrepreneurs, believe in yourself, think big, and ask for more money. And so on that, I would like a big round of applause to our 3 fantastic panelists. Thank you so much, ladies. So those who have questions, please catch them after.